My daughter invited me to her awards night, just to humiliate me in front of everyone. So I'm Joshua, 62 years old, and I've spent my entire life working with my hands to give my daughter Sarah the opportunities I never had. When her invitation to a prestigious awards ceremony arrived, I thought finally our relationship was healing. Something felt off about her insistence I sit front row, but I ignored my instincts. If only I'd known she invited me just to mock me in front of her colleagues. Let me tell you what happened when my own flesh and blood used me as the punchline to elevate her status. Where are you watching from today? Drop a comment below and subscribe to see how I maintained my dignity when everyone expected me to crumble. Construction was in my blood. My father built houses his father before him, laid railroad tracks, and from the time I could hold a hammer, I knew my path would follow theirs. I never finished college. Just wasn't in the cards for a kid from my neighborhood. But I was good with my hands, reliable, and willing to work harder than anyone else on the job site. I met Amanda during a renovation project on her parents' lake house. She was home from her final year at university, smart, sophisticated, from a wealthy family that summered at the lake. She'd bring lemonade to the workers, but she always lingered to talk with me. Her parents were horrified when we started dating. A blue-collar worker with no degree and their educated daughter. But Amanda saw something in me that transcended social status. My work ethic and my integrity, my dreams of building something meaningful. We married against her parents' wishes. They didn't attend the wedding, a simple ceremony at the local courthouse followed by dinner at my mother's house. Amanda didn't seem to mind. "They'll come around," she'd say, with that optimistic smile that made me fall in love with her. Sarah came along 2 years later. The moment I held my daughter, something shifted inside me. I looked down at her perfect face and made a silent promise that she would have every opportunity I never did. She would never struggle the way I had. She would have choices. When Sarah was born, I was working for Midwest Construction as a foreman. The pay was decent, but not enough for the kind of future I envisioned for my daughter. So I picked up night shifts as a security guard at the local mall. For years, I worked 16-hour days, coming home just long enough to kiss my sleeping daughter's forehead before collapsing into bed myself. Amanda supported my drive. "You're building her future," she'd say, when I'd apologize for missing another dinner or school event. She kept a special photo album of Sarah's milestones, making sure I didn't miss anything important. When Sarah was 14, Amanda found a lump. The diagnosis was devastating, aggressive breast cancer. Within 6 months, I watched my vibrant, beautiful wife wither away. On her final night, she made me promise to make sure Sarah got the best education possible. "She's so bright, Joshua," Amanda whispered, her voice barely audible. "Promise me she'll go to college. Promise me she'll have the chances we didn't." I promised. And I kept that promise no matter the cost. After Amanda died, it was just Sarah and me. I tried my best to be both mother and father, but I know I fell short. I could provide financially, but the emotional terrain of raising a teenage girl was foreign territory. Still, we muddled through. Sarah was studious and determined, seeming to channel her grief into academic excellence. With her grades and my savings, Sarah got into Westridge Academy, an elite private high school across town. The first day I dropped her off, I noticed how different we were from the other families. Luxury cars lined the circular driveway, while I pulled up in my dusty work truck, still wearing my construction clothes, because I had to head straight to a job site. "Could you maybe park around the corner tomorrow, Dad?" Sarah asked, not meeting my eyes. That was the beginning of the change. The more time Sarah spent at Westridge, the more I felt her slipping away. Her new friends were the children of doctors, lawyers, and executives. They had vacation homes and took spring break trips to Europe. Our modest 3-bedroom house and my blue-collar status became sources of obvious embarrassment for her. Still, I kept working and saving. When Sarah was accepted to Barnett University to study law, I couldn't have been prouder. The tuition was astronomical, but I had been preparing for this moment for years. I sold our house and moved into a small apartment to free up more funds. I picked up additional weekend work refurbishing old furniture. Every dollar went to ensuring Sarah could focus on her studies without the burden of student loans. During her college years, Sarah came home less and less. When she did visit, she'd bring laundry but spend most of the time on her phone texting friends. She stopped introducing me to her classmates. Once I overheard her tell someone I was in finance, rather than admitting I worked construction. I told myself it was just a phase. She was finding her place in a different world than the one she grew up in. It would pass. Sarah graduated with honors. I sat in the audience fighting back tears of pride and grief, proud of all she had accomplished, sad that Amanda wasn't there to see it. After the ceremony, Sarah introduced me to a few of her professors, her smile tight, and her explanations of who I was brief. She seemed relieved when I declined the invitation to the after-party with her friends. She was immediately recruited by Preston Hamilton and Reed, one of the top law firms in the city. Within 2 years, she had her own apartment, in an upscale neighborhood, a new car, and a social circle I'd never met. Our contact dwindled to occasional text messages and obligatory holiday calls. Each time I suggested visiting her, there was some reason it wasn't convenient. I kept telling myself that she was busy building her career, that eventually, when life settled down, we would reconnect, that the sacrifices had been worth it because she had the opportunities her mother and I had wanted for her. That's what I told myself, even as the years of minimal contact stretched on, even as the invitations to her life became fewer and farther between, even as I realized I only heard from her when she needed something. The phone call came on a Tuesday evening in April. I was just settling in with a TV dinner after a long day at the site when I saw Sarah's name flash across my phone screen. My heart leapt. She rarely called midweek. "Dad," she said, her voice warm in a way I hadn't heard in years. "I have some exciting news." I sat up straighter, TV dinner forgotten. "What is it, sweetheart?" "I'm receiving the Young Lawyer of the Year award at the City Bar Association Gala next month. It's a really big deal. Partners from all the major firms will be there, and a few judges, too." "That's wonderful, Sarah. I'm so proud of you." My chest swelled with pride. This was what all those years of sacrifice had been for. There was a slight pause before she continued. "I was hoping you would come. They're giving me 2 tickets, and I'd like you to be there." I nearly dropped the phone. After years of polite distance, this invitation felt monumental. "Of course I'll be there. Just tell me when and where." "Great," she said, and I could hear the smile in her voice. "It's formal attire. You'll need a suit. And Dad, I really want you to meet some of my colleagues. I've told them about you." After we hung up, I sat in my recliner for a long time, emotions washing over me in waves. This was the moment I'd been waiting for. Sarah reaching out, wanting to include me in her success, wanting me to meet the people in her life. Maybe this was the beginning of a new chapter for us. The next few weeks were a flurry of preparation. I hadn't owned a proper suit since Amanda's funeral, and that one was now hopelessly outdated and too large. Years of physical labor and sparse self-care had whittled my frame. I went to a department store and spent more than I could afford on a charcoal gray suit, crisp white shirt, and blue tie that the salesperson assured me was appropriate for formal events. I got a haircut, had my shoes polished, even practiced eating with proper etiquette by watching videos online. In the evenings, I would stand in front of my bathroom mirror, rehearsing small talk and introductions. "Hello, I'm Joshua Wilson, Sarah's father. Congratulations on your firm's recent case." The night before the event, I found myself looking through old photo albums. Sarah as a toddler on my shoulders. Sarah in her soccer uniform missing 2 front teeth. Sarah and Amanda baking cookies in our old kitchen. The 3 of us at the beach squinting into the sun. So many memories, so many moments that had shaped us. I ran my finger over a photo of Sarah's high school graduation. Amanda had been gone for 3 years by then. In the photo, Sarah smiled stiffly beside me, already pulling away. Would tomorrow bridge that gap? I fell asleep hoping it would. Sarah had been specific about the arrangements. Be there at 6, she'd instructed. The ceremony starts at 7, but I need you there early. I've reserved a seat for you in the front row. It's important that you sit exactly where they place you. Her insistence seemed odd, but I was too pleased about being included to question it. I arrived at the hotel at 5:45, heart pounding with anticipation. The ballroom was already filling with people in expensive suits and elegant dresses. Waiters circulated with champagne and hors d'oeuvres. I spotted Sarah across the room, stunning in a black dress, her mother's cheekbones, and my determined chin creating a striking combination. When she saw me, she waved and made her way over. "Dad, you made it." She kissed my cheek, the gesture formal, but warm enough to make my heart swell. "The suit looks good on you. Wouldn't miss it for the world, sweetheart. I'm so proud of you." She glanced around, then lowered her voice. "Remember, your seat is in the front row, right in the center. It's marked with your name. Please don't switch seats with anyone. Okay, it's important for the program." Before I could ask why, she was whisked away by a colleague, leaving me to find my own way. As I navigated through clusters of people, I noticed curious glances in my direction. Several times I caught snippets of whispered conversations that stopped when I approached. At the time, I attributed it to being an obvious outsider in this world of legal elites. My seat was exactly where Sarah had said, front and center, with a small placard reading, "Reserved, Mr. Wilson." On either side of me were people I assumed were other award recipients' family members, though they were engaged in conversations that clearly indicated they were familiar with this world in ways I was not. A young man in an impeccably tailored suit approached. "Mr. Wilson, I'm Thomas Bradford, Sarah's boyfriend. She asked me to check that you found your seat." I stood to shake his hand, immediately aware of his appraising glance, taking in my department store suit and weathered hands. "Nice to meet you, Thomas. Sarah hasn't mentioned she was seeing anyone." Something flickered across his face. Amusement. Pity. "We've been together for about 8 months now. Sarah probably just wanted to wait until things were serious before making introductions." "Of course," I said, though Sarah had never been one to wait for relationships to become serious before introducing boyfriends in the past. Thomas checked his watch. "I should get back. Sarah wanted me to make sure you were comfortable. Can I get you anything before the ceremony starts?" "No, thank you. I'm fine." As he walked away, I couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. The way Thomas had looked at me, the whispers around the room, Sarah's insistence on my specific seating arrangement. It all felt orchestrated somehow. But I pushed the thoughts aside. Tonight was about celebrating Sarah's achievement. Whatever discomfort I felt was worth it to be part of her special moment. The ceremony began with the association president welcoming everyone and explaining the significance of the awards. I sat straight in my chair, chest puffed with pride despite my growing unease. Several minor awards were presented first, each accompanied by polite applause and brief acceptance speeches. Throughout the preliminaries, I noticed Sarah at a table near the stage with several colleagues, including Thomas. They were whispering and occasionally glancing in my direction. Once the entire table erupted in muffled laughter after Sarah said something while looking toward me. My stomach tightened, but I told myself I was being paranoid. And now, the president announced, the moment we've all been waiting for. The Young Lawyer of the Year award recognizes exceptional achievement, client advocacy, and community impact from an attorney under 35. This year's recipient has demonstrated remarkable skill in corporate law while maintaining a commitment to pro bono work. Please join me in congratulating Sarah Wilson of Preston, Hamilton, and Reed. The room filled with applause as Sarah gracefully made her way to the stage. She looked radiant, confident, every inch the successful professional. My eyes misted with pride. If only Amanda could see her now. Sarah adjusted the microphone and smiled at the audience. Thank you for this tremendous honor. I'm deeply grateful to the partners at Preston, Hamilton, and Reed for their mentorship, especially Janet Preston, who took a chance on me as a summer associate and has guided my career ever since. She continued acknowledging various colleagues, judges, and friends who had supported her. Her speech was articulate and warm, exactly what I would have expected from my brilliant daughter. Then came the shift. Many of you know that successful attorneys often come from legal families. Judges, law professors, established attorneys who provide guidance and connections. She paused, her eyes finding mine in the audience. My path was quite different. My chest swelled. She was going to acknowledge my sacrifices, how I'd worked multiple jobs to put her through school. I sat up straighter, ready to receive this public acknowledgement of our journey together. I grew up with a father who worked construction. She continued, her tone shifting subtly. He never went to college, could barely help me with homework past the 5th grade. Laughter rippled through the audience. My smile froze. In fact, when I was applying to law school and told him about the LSAT, he thought it was a type of television. More laughter, louder this time. He asked if we got good reception for it. The audience erupted. I felt heat rising in my face as I realized what was happening. This wasn't an acknowledgement of sacrifice. This was mockery. When I brought home my first legal brief to proofread, he handed it back and said the only thing wrong was that it was too brief. The laughter grew. He thought a brief was supposed to be short. My hands gripped the armrests of my chair. Each word felt like a physical blow. The room seemed to tilt around me as Sarah continued, her voice animated, playing to her audience. When I graduated from law school, he showed up in work boots. Work boots to a law school graduation. The crowd howled. The dean asked if he was there to fix the air conditioning. I could feel eyes on me, hear the laughter echoing around the room. My face burned with humiliation. My own daughter, my child whom I had sacrificed everything for, was using me as the punchline to elevate herself in front of her colleagues. But seriously, Sarah continued, her voice softening performatively. Overcoming one's background is part of the American dream, isn't it? And I'm so fortunate that despite my disadvantaged start, I found mentors who could teach me the things my father never could, like which fork to use at dinner or how to pronounce charcuterie. Another wave of laughter. I sat paralyzed, unable to move or look away. I made eye contact with Sarah, desperately searching for some sign that this was an elaborate joke that would end with recognition of my contributions. But I saw only satisfaction in her eyes. Pleasure at the response she was getting, pride in how successfully she was entertaining the crowd at my expense. In that moment, I understood with crushing clarity why I had been invited, why I had been seated front and center, why there had been so many curious glances and whispers. I wasn't here as a proud father. I was here as a prop, a punchline, a before picture, to contrast with Sarah's after. My heart hammered in my chest. My ears rang. I couldn't breathe properly. Around me, people wiped tears of laughter from their eyes, some glancing at me with a mix of amusement and pity. I had never felt so small, so completely humiliated in my entire life. Sarah concluded her speech with more standard thank yous and left the stage to enthusiastic applause, stopping to accept congratulations as she made her way back to her table. Not once did she look in my direction again. I sat immobile, feeling the physical symptoms of my humiliation, the flush that had spread from my face down my neck, the cold sweat on my back, the trembling in my hands that I couldn't control. All around me, people were rising for a break before the dinner portion of the evening, some still chuckling over Sarah's charming and authentic speech. How could my own child do this to me? How could the little girl I had read bedtime stories to, whose scraped knees I had bandaged, whose education I had funded with the sweat of my brow, how could she stand in front of hundreds of people and use me as an object of ridicule I needed to leave? I couldn't sit through a dinner watching people who had laughed at my expense continue to celebrate my daughter's success. Success that had apparently come at the cost of her integrity and compassion. As I stood on shaky legs, I caught Sarah's eye across the room. There was no remorse there, not even recognition of what she had done. Instead, she frowned slightly, as if my obvious distress was an inconvenience, an unwelcome deviation from her perfect evening. That look told me everything I needed to know. I wasn't a father to her anymore. I was a relic of a past she wanted to escape, an embarrassment to be tolerated only when useful for contrast or comic relief. I turned and walked toward the exit, back straight, despite the weight of humiliation pressing down on me. Behind me, the celebration continued, uninterrupted, my pain, nothing but a momentary entertainment for people who would forget my existence before their dessert was served. As I pushed through the doors into the hotel corridor, the sounds of laughter and conversation faded. My mind replayed Sarah's words, each one cutting deeper than the last. I had known for years that she was embarrassed by my lack of education and blue-collar job, but I never imagined she held me in such contempt. I leaned against the wall, trying to steady my breathing. Memories crashed over me in waves. Sarah, as a little girl, sitting on my lap, while I read her favorite books, sounding out the difficult words slowly, because reading had never come easily to me. Sarah, at 12, proudly showing me her straight-A report card, while I beamed with pride. Sarah, at 16, accepting my beat-up Toyota with feigned enthusiasm because it was all I could afford after paying her private school tuition. I remembered the bone-deep exhaustion of working 16-hour days, falling into bed, only to rise before dawn and do it all again. The times I'd skipped meals because money was tight, but never once let Sarah go without. The winter I'd gone without a proper coat because her school trip to Washington, D.C. came due the same month the furnace needed replacing. And the watch. My father's vintage Omega, the only thing of value he'd ever owned, passed down to me on his deathbed. I'd sold it to pay for Sarah's law school application fees when an unexpected medical bill had depleted my savings. I'd never told her where the money came from. I'd wanted her to pursue her dreams without feeling burdened by my sacrifices. "Are you all right, sir?" I looked up to see an elderly man in a waiter's uniform regarding me with concern. His name tag read Walter. "Just needed some air." I managed, straightening up. Walter nodded, his eyes kind. "I heard that young lawyer's speech." He shook his head slightly. "Some people forget where they come from." The simple acknowledgement of what had happened, the fact that someone else had witnessed my humiliation and recognized it for what it was, brought a lump to my throat. I nodded, unable to speak. "My daughter's a doctor now." Walter continued, polishing a water glass with his cloth. "Sometimes she uses words I don't understand, but she never makes me feel small for it." He met my eyes. "That's the measure of a person, I think. Not how high they climb, but who they bring with them. His words struck a chord. What had happened in that ballroom wasn't just about Sarah being embarrassed by my background. It was about character. Hers, not mine. "Thank you," I said, my voice rough. Walter nodded and continued down the hall with his tray. I took a deep breath and headed toward the elevators. I wouldn't make a scene. I would simply go home and figure out how to process this betrayal. As the elevator doors were closing, a manicured hand shot between them. The doors reopened to reveal Sarah, her expression a mix of irritation and concern. "Dad, where are you going?" "The dinner is about to start." I looked at my daughter. This stranger in an expensive dress who had just publicly ridiculed me and struggled to find words. "I think it's best if I leave." "You can't leave now," she hissed, stepping into the elevator and letting the doors close behind her. "There's networking after dinner. I wanted to introduce you to some people." The absurdity of her statement hit me like a physical blow. "Introduce me. After what you just did, you used me as a punchline, Sarah. You humiliated me in front of an entire room of people." She rolled her eyes, a gesture so dismissive it took my breath away. "Don't be so sensitive. It was just a few jokes. Everyone loved it." "Why did you invite me?" I asked, needing to hear her say it. "What was the point of having me here tonight?" Sarah hesitated, then sighed as if explaining something to a child. "Look, Dad, the legal world is all about narrative. Everyone has a story about overcoming obstacles. I needed to establish mine. And I'm the obstacle, your own father. The man who worked 2 jobs to put you through school. You don't understand how this world works," she said, frustration edging her voice. "Where you come from matters. Who your family is matters. I've had to work twice as hard because I don't have the right connections, the right background." "So you thought it would help your career to mock me, to make jokes about my education, my job, even my clothes. It wasn't personal, Dad. It was just positioning. I needed to acknowledge my background in a way that showed I've risen above it." And the elevator stopped at the lobby level, but neither of us moved to exit. We stood facing each other, separated by more than just physical space. "Risen above it," I repeated slowly. "Risen above me." Something flickered in Sarah's eyes. Not remorse, but impatience. "You're making this a bigger deal than it is. Come back upstairs. There are partners I want you to meet. They'll love the whole charity case angle." "Charity case?" The words hit like a slap. "Is that how you see me, as your charity case?" That came out wrong. She backpedaled, though her expression suggested otherwise. "I just meant they'll appreciate meeting the person behind the story." I shook my head, the final pieces falling into place. "I'm not going back up there to be paraded around as your disadvantaged background made flesh. I'm leaving." As I moved to press the lobby button again, Sarah's next words stopped me cold. "Fine. Leave. It's what you do best, isn't it? Just like you left Mom to face cancer alone while you worked all those precious double shifts." The accusation was so unfair, so cruel, that for a moment I couldn't respond. I had worked those shifts to pay for experimental treatments the insurance wouldn't cover. Amanda had insisted I keep working. We had both known what was at stake. "That's not true, and you know it," I finally said, my voice low. "Whatever helps you sleep at night," she replied, her tone bitter. "But while we're being honest, you should know I changed my name professionally. I'm using Mom's maiden name now, Sarah Kensington. It sounds better, more fitting for who I am now." The elevator doors opened to the lobby, but I stood frozen. My daughter had erased me so completely that she'd discarded my name. The final connection between us severed. "I see." I managed stepping out of the elevator. I turned back to look at her one last time, this stranger who had once been my world. Congratulations on your award, Sarah Kensington. As the doors closed between us, I caught a glimpse of something in her eyes. Not regret exactly, but perhaps the first inkling that she had crossed a line that couldn't be uncrossed. Then she was gone, and I was alone in the vast hotel lobby, my world irrevocably altered. The drive home passed in a blur. Twice I had to pull over because tears obscured my vision. Once parked on the shoulder of the highway, with my hazard lights blinking, I shouted and pounded the steering wheel until my voice was hoarse and my hands ached. The rage and grief poured out of me in waves, leaving me hollow. By the time I reached my apartment, I felt emptied of emotion. I moved on autopilot, hanging up the suit I would never wear again, washing my face sitting on the edge of my bed in the dark. The digital clock read 9:47 p.m. The gala would still be going on. People would be mingling, networking, perhaps still chuckling over Sarah's amusing anecdotes about her uncouth father. I reached for the nightstand drawer and pulled out a small wooden box. Inside were the few keepsakes I had held onto through various downsizings. Amanda's wedding ring, a lock of Sarah's baby hair, the program from her law school graduation, a few photographs. I spread the photos on the bed. Sarah, through the years, gap-toothed first grader, awkward preteen, poised high school graduate, confident law student. In the early photos, she looked at the camera with unguarded joy. In the later ones, her smile became practiced, her eyes more guarded. When had I lost her? Was it when Amanda died, when she started at the private school, or had the seeds been planted even earlier? Had I been so focused on providing financially that I'd failed to give her what she truly needed? No, I thought, shaking my head. I'd done my best as both mother and father. I'd attended every school conference, helped with homework, until it surpassed my abilities, celebrated every achievement. I'd tried to instill values, honesty, hard work, compassion. Somewhere along the way, Sarah had rejected those values, rejected me. I put the photos away, unable to bear the contrast between the child I'd raised and the woman who had humiliated me tonight. Sleep evaded me. I lay awake replaying Sarah's speech, each memory triggering fresh pain. Dawn found me at the kitchen table, bleary-eyed but oddly calm. Something had shifted during the long night. The crushing hurt remained, but alongside it grew a clarity I hadn't expected. Sarah's actions revealed her character, not mine. I had nothing to be ashamed of. My work-roughened hands had built a foundation that allowed her to reach heights I never could. That she now scorned those hands said more about her than about me. I made coffee and watched the sunrise paint my small kitchen in golden light. For the first time in decades, I had no child to support, no tuition to save for, no extra shifts to pick up. My life was my own again. The thought was both terrifying and strangely liberating. The phone rang, startling me from my reverie. The caller ID showed Frank Mercer, an old friend from my days at Midwest Construction. We hadn't spoken in months. "Joshua," Frank said when I answered. "Hope I'm not calling too early. Got something you might want to know about." "What's that?" I asked, grateful for the distraction. "That big law firm downtown, Preston something. They're handling a class action for a bunch of us old-timers from Midwest. Something about pension mismanagement. They're holding a town hall next week to explain the case." The name stopped me cold. Preston, Hamilton, and Reed, Sarah's firm. "What's it about exactly?" I asked, my mind racing. "Remember how the company got sold back in 2015? Turns out the new owners shifted pension funds around, invested in their own subsidiaries. A lot of guys are getting a fraction of what they were promised. The lawyers think we've got a case." I remembered. I'd left Midwest before the sale, but many of my friends had stayed. Frank had been there over 30 years. "Who's the lawyer handling it?" I asked, though I already suspected the answer. "Some hotshot young woman. Can't remember her name. Sarah something." My heart sank. Of course it would be Sarah. The universe had a cruel sense of humor. "Anyway," Frank continued, "the meeting's next Thursday at the community center. Thought you might want to come since you know how the company worked back then. Could be helpful." I nearly declined automatically. The last thing I wanted was to see Sarah again. But something stopped me. This case affected people I had worked alongside for years. Decent, hard-working people who deserved their pensions. And I did know things about Midwest. About the company structure, the management practices, the paperwork. When I'd been promoted to foreman, I'd kept meticulous records of everything. Some of those records might still be in my storage unit. A strange thought began to form. Not revenge. I couldn't bring myself to want that even now. But perhaps justice and recognition. "I'll be there," I told Frank, "and I might have some documents that could help." After hanging up, I sat with my cooling coffee thinking. There was a certain symmetry to the situation. Sarah had used my background to elevate herself last night. Perhaps I could use my background to actually help people, including myself. I spent the day in my storage unit digging through boxes of old work files. By evening, I had found what I was looking for. Documentation of questionable financial practices dating back years before the sale. Notes about conversations with management about pension funds. Copies of internal memos that had crossed my desk during my time as foreman. None of it was smoking gun evidence, but together it painted a picture of a company that had been playing fast and loose with employee benefits long before the new owners took over. It might provide context and direction for the lawyers building the case. Over the next few days, I contacted other former colleagues, gathering more information. I researched similar cases online, trying to understand the legal principles involved. I printed relevant employment laws at the public library, highlighting sections that seemed applicable. As Thursday approached, I felt a sense of purpose I hadn't experienced in years. This wasn't about Sarah anymore. It was about using my knowledge, the very blue-collar experience she had mocked, to help people who deserved better. And if in the process I showed my daughter that my background had value she couldn't see, that would be a bonus. On Thursday morning, I dressed carefully. Not in a suit, but in clean jeans and a button-down shirt. Professional, but authentic. I gathered my documents in a folder and drove to the community center, heart pounding, with a strange mix of apprehension and determination. The parking lot was nearly full when I arrived. Inside, the meeting room buzzed with the voices of dozens of former Midwest employees and their families. At the front, a projector was set up beside a podium. A table with Preston Hamilton and Reed materials sat nearby. I found Frank near the back and slid into a seat beside him. "Quite a turnout," I observed. "Word got around." Frank nodded. "People are angry. Some of these guys are living on Social Security because their pensions got slashed." I scanned the room, recognizing many faces. Men and women I'd worked alongside for years. Salt-of-the-earth people who had put in decades of hard physical labor with the promise of security in their old age. At precisely 7:00 p.m., the side door opened and a small group entered. Thomas, Sarah's boyfriend, led the way, followed by two other young attorneys, and finally Sarah herself, immaculate in a navy blue suit, hair pulled back in a professional bun. My stomach clenched at the sight of her memories of the gala flooding back. But I forced myself to remain seated to breathe steadily. I was here for a purpose. Thomas approached the podium while Sarah and the others arranged materials on the table. "Good evening, everyone. Thank you for coming." I'm Thomas Bradford, associate at Preston Hamilton and Reed. We're here tonight to discuss the class action lawsuit against Midwest Construction and its parent company, Grant Enterprises, regarding the mismanagement of pension funds. He continued with an overview of the case using legal terminology that I could see was causing confusion among many of the former workers. Several times people raised hands with questions that Thomas answered with barely concealed impatience. Finally, he introduced Sarah. And now I'll turn things over to Sarah Kensington, the associate who will be taking lead on this case. The name hit me like a physical blow. Hearing it in this context, professional official, made the change real in a way it hadn't been before. Sarah stepped forward, confident and poised. Thank you all for coming tonight. As Mr. Bradford explained, we believe there is substantial evidence that Grant Enterprises violated ERISA regulations in their handling of the Midwest Construction Pension Fund following the 2015 acquisition. She continued in the same vein, using complex legal terms without explanation, speaking about the workers' experiences as abstract concepts rather than lived realities. I watched the faces around the room grow increasingly frustrated and confused. During the Q&A, an older man raised his hand. Miss, I worked 37 years at Midwest. They promised me a full pension. Now I'm getting less than half what I was counting on. My wife and I can't make ends meet. Can you tell me in plain English if I'm going to get what I was promised? Sarah's smile was professionally sympathetic, but didn't reach her eyes. While we can't guarantee specific outcomes, we believe we can negotiate a settlement that will address the most egregious discrepancies in benefit distribution. The man looked at his wife, both clearly unsure what Sarah had actually said. Another worker stood without being called on. The problem started before 2015. They were playing games with the pension fund, back when Miller was CEO, moving money around, investing in risky ventures. I complained to HR about it in 2012, and they shut me down. Sarah glanced at her notes. Our case focuses specifically on actions taken after the acquisition by Grant Enterprises. Prior management decisions are not within the scope of our complaint. The worker shook his head. But it's all connected. If you don't look at what happened before, you're missing half the story. I appreciate your perspective, Sarah said dismissively, but we've developed our legal strategy based on where we see the strongest evidence of malfeasance. I could feel the room's energy shifting from hopeful to disillusioned. These people had come looking for an advocate who understood their situation. Instead, they were getting legal jargon and a narrow approach that ignored crucial context. Before I fully realized what I was doing, I stood up. Excuse me, I said, my voice carrying in the now quiet room. I worked at Midwest for 22 years, 15 of them as a foreman. I have documentation that shows the pension issues started long before the acquisition. All eyes turned to me, including Sarah's. I saw the moment she recognized me. The shock, the flash of alarm, quickly masked by professional composure. I think we have time for one more question, Thomas interjected from the side, clearly trying to wrap things up. This isn't a question, I said evenly, holding up my folder. It's information that could strengthen your case. If you're really interested in helping these people, you should consider looking at the bigger picture. Sarah stared at me, a complex mix of emotions crossing her face. I could see her calculating, reassessing. The room had gone completely silent, everyone watching our exchange with interest. And you are? Thomas asked, frowning. I looked directly at Sarah. Joshua Wilson, former foreman at Midwest Construction. I paused, then added quietly, and Sarah's father. A murmur ran through the crowd. Sarah's expression froze, but her eyes darted around the room, taking in the reactions. I could almost see her mind working, trying to determine the best way to handle this unexpected development. After a moment, she stepped forward. "Thank you for coming, Mr. Wilson. We'd be interested in reviewing any relevant documentation after the meeting." The dismissal was clear. She wanted me to sit down and stop disrupting her presentation. 5 days ago, I might have complied, not wanting to embarrass her. But something had changed in me. I was no longer willing to be sidelined or dismissed. Not when I had something valuable to contribute. Not when people I cared about needed help. "I think everyone here would benefit from understanding the full context," I said, my voice steady. "With your permission, I'd like to explain what I found." Sarah's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. We locked eyes across the room, engaged in a silent battle of wills. The professional part of her wanted to shut this down immediately, but I could see her awareness of the optics, refusing to hear out a former foreman, especially one she'd just been identified as related to, would look bad. "We have the room for another 30 minutes. She finally said, her tone controlled. "Perhaps Mr. Wilson could share his perspective briefly." I nodded and made my way to the front of the room, folder in hand. As I passed Sarah, our eyes met again. I saw uncertainty there, perhaps a flicker of fear about what I might say or do. I took a deep breath and turned to face the crowd. My former colleagues, my friends. I was at Midwest from 1989 to 2011. For most of that time, things were straight. We worked hard, the company made money, our benefits were secure. But around 2008, during the financial crisis, things started to change. I opened my folder and began walking them through what I'd found. The gradual shifting of pension investments into riskier ventures, the change in reporting practices, the internal memos about optimizing benefit structures. I explained in plain language what each document meant, connecting the dots between management decisions and the impact on workers' retirement funds. As I spoke, I could see heads nodding, people leaning forward, recognition dawning on faces. These were their experiences being validated, their concerns being articulated in terms they understood. I glanced occasionally at Sarah. Her expression had shifted from tense to attentive, even surprised. She was taking notes, whispering to Thomas, really listening to what I was saying. The point is, I concluded, what happened after Grant Enterprises took over wasn't new. It was an acceleration of practices that were already in place. If you look at the whole timeline, you'll see a pattern of systematic dismantling of pension protections over more than a decade. That makes the case stronger, not weaker. The room erupted in applause and questions. Frank called out from the back. "Joshua always kept the best records, saved my behind more than once with safety inspections." Another former colleague added, "He knows more about how Midwest really ran than any manager ever did." I held up the folder. "Everything I have is available to the legal team. I want this case to succeed. All of you deserve your full pensions. Everything you worked for, everything you were promised." I looked directly at Sarah as I said the last part. Her eyes were fixed on me, her expression unreadable. I handed the folder to Thomas and stepped away from the podium. "Thank you, Mr. Wilson," Sarah said, moving forward to reclaim the space. "This is valuable information that we'll certainly incorporate into our approach." Her voice was professional, but I caught a note of genuine surprise. She addressed the room. "In light of these new insights, we'd like to schedule individual meetings with anyone who has similar documentation or recollections, particularly from the pre-acquisition period." As the meeting concluded and people began to approach the lawyers with questions, I made my way toward the exit. I had done what I came to do. I had contributed something meaningful. I had shown, to myself as much as to Sarah, that my experience had value, that my years of blue-collar work had given me knowledge worth respecting. I was almost to the door when I heard Sarah's voice behind me. "Dad?" I turned to find her standing a few feet away, her professional mask slightly softened. "Those documents," she said quietly. "They're exactly what we needed. How did you know to keep them?" I shrugged. When you work construction, you learn to document everything. Contracts, timelines, materials. It all matters. I always told my crew, if it's not on paper, it didn't happen. A flicker of something, recognition, respect, crossed her face. "Would you be willing to look at the case materials? Your perspective could be helpful." It wasn't an apology. It wasn't even an acknowledgement of what had happened at the gala. But it was something. A crack in the wall between us, a small admission that I had something to offer beyond being a cautionary tale or a punchline. "I'd be willing to help the case," I said carefully. "These people deserve better than what they got." Sarah nodded, her expression thoughtful. "I'll call you tomorrow to set up a time." As I drove home that night, I felt a complex mix of emotions. The hurt from the gala hadn't disappeared. The memory of those laughing faces, of Sarah's calculated use of my life as entertainment, still stung. But alongside the pain was something unexpected. A quiet sense of dignity, of having stood my ground and shown my worth on my own terms. I hadn't sought revenge. I hadn't tried to embarrass Sarah or undermine her professionally. I had simply offered what I knew, what my years of disadvantaged background had taught me. And in doing so, I had reclaimed a piece of myself that Sarah's mockery had threatened to take away. Whether this would change anything between us remained to be seen. But for the first time since that awful night, and I felt hope that healing might be possible, not because Sarah had changed, but because I had remembered who I was. The next few weeks unfolded in ways I couldn't have predicted. True to her word, Sarah called the day after the town hall meeting. Our conversation was stiffly professional, focused entirely on the case and how my knowledge could contribute. We arranged for me to meet with the legal team the following Monday. At that meeting, I brought every document I had found, organized chronologically and by relevance. I explained each one, providing context about Midwest's operations that the lawyers, for all their education, simply didn't have. I could see their initial skepticism give way to interest, then appreciation. Sarah remained formal throughout, addressing me as Mr. Wilson in front of her colleagues. Only occasionally did our eyes meet across the conference table, and when they did, I saw confusion there, as if she was seeing me through a new lens and wasn't quite sure what to make of the image. Over the following weeks, I became an unofficial consultant on the case. The legal team would call with questions about company structure, reporting lines, or terminology in internal documents. Each time I provided answers, I could hear the surprised respect in their voices. These highly educated professionals were learning from a construction foreman with a high school diploma. Throughout this period, Sarah and I maintained our professional distance. We didn't discuss the gala or her speech. We didn't talk about her name change or our fractured relationship. We were two people working toward a common goal, nothing more. But I noticed small changes. She stopped introducing me to colleagues as Mr. Wilson and began using my father. She asked questions about my time at Midwest that went beyond the case requirements, showing genuine interest in my experience. Once, when I explained a particularly complex chain of management decisions that had impacted the pension fund, she said quietly, "I didn't realize you understood all this so well." "There's a lot about me you don't know," I replied simply. Meanwhile, I was making changes of my own. For the first time in decades, I had time and energy to focus on myself. I joined a community center where many retirees gathered for coffee and conversation. I reconnected with old friends who didn't care about my education or social status. I started volunteering at a program teaching construction skills to at-risk youth, young people who reminded me of myself at their age, full of potential but lacking opportunity. In these new environments, I found myself respected for exactly the qualities Sarah had mocked. My practical knowledge, my work ethic, my straightforward communication style. The teenagers in the construction program especially seemed to appreciate my approach. "You don't talk down to us," one boy told me. "You just show us how to do the thing and expect we can learn it." The case against Grant Enterprises progressed. With the additional context I had provided, the legal team expanded their complaint to include actions by previous management. Settlement talks began with preliminary figures that looked promising for the former employees. Through it all, I maintained my dignity. I didn't seek validation from Sarah or her colleagues. I didn't need their approval to know my worth. This realization was healing in ways I hadn't expected. Then, nearly 2 months after the town hall meeting, an envelope arrived in my mailbox. Inside was a handwritten letter on plain paper, not firm letterhead, with Sarah's signature at the bottom. My hands shook slightly as I began to read. "Dad, there are things I need to say that I don't know how to say in person. Working with you these past weeks has shown me a side of you I never fully appreciated. Your intelligence, your attention to detail, your commitment to helping others. That night at the awards ceremony, I betrayed not just you, but also myself and everything Mom would have wanted for us. There's no excuse for what I did. It was cruel and calculated, and I've been avoiding facing that truth. The respect you've earned from my colleagues, earned through your knowledge and character, not through degrees or credentials, has forced me to confront my own prejudices and insecurities. I've been so focused on escaping what I saw as the limitations of my background that I failed to appreciate its strengths. I don't expect forgiveness. What I did isn't easily forgiven, but I would like to talk if you're willing. Not about the case, but about us. Sarah Wilson Kensington." The addition of Wilson to her signature didn't erase the hurt, but it was a gesture that touched me deeply. I sat with the letter for a long time, unsure how to respond. Part of me wanted to protect myself from further pain. Another part recognized this might be our only chance to heal the rift between us. After much thought, I texted her, "I'm free Saturday morning. Murphy's Diner on Oak Street at 10. Her response came quickly. "I'll be there." Murphy's was a far cry from the upscale restaurants Sarah usually frequented. It was a simple place with vinyl booths and bottomless coffee where the waitresses knew regular customers by name. It was neutral territory. Not her world or mine, but somewhere in between. I arrived early and chose a booth near the back. When Sarah walked in, I almost didn't recognize her. Gone was the power suit and perfect hair. She wore jeans, a simple sweater, and minimal makeup. She looked younger, more vulnerable, more like the daughter I remembered. She slid into the booth across from me, hands wrapped around her purse strap. "Thank you for meeting me." I nodded, not trusting myself to speak yet. The waitress came for our orders, black coffee for me, tea for Sarah, giving us a moment to gather our thoughts. When we were alone again, Sarah spoke first. "I don't know where to begin. Why did you do it?" The question that had haunted me for months finally emerged. "Was I really such an embarrassment to you?" Sarah's eyes filled with tears. "It wasn't about you, not really. It was about me. My insecurities, my desperate need to fit in with people who came from privilege." She wiped at her eyes. "From the first day at Westridge Academy, I felt like an imposter. Everyone seemed to know things I didn't. Cultural references, social rules, even how to speak and dress. I was constantly afraid of being exposed as not belonging." "So you decided to expose yourself first on your own terms," I said, understanding dawning. By making a joke of your background, you controlled the narrative. She nodded. It became a strategy. If I was open about my humble origins, if I turned it into a charming story of overcoming adversity, then no one could use it against me. She met my eyes. But somewhere along the way, the strategy became the truth. I started believing that my background, that you, were things to be overcome rather than integral parts of who I am. Our drinks arrived. I took a long sip of coffee, processing her words. That night at the gala, she continued, her voice breaking slightly. I went too far. I crossed a line I can't uncross. I hurt the one person who has always supported me, always believed in me. And for what? A few laughs from people who don't really care about me. The raw pain in her voice reached something in me. This wasn't the calculated Sarah of the awards ceremony or the professional lawyer from the town hall. This was my daughter, confused and hurting, and trying to find her way back to herself. The case has been a wake-up call, she said. Watching you explain complex financial maneuvers to Harvard-educated attorneys, seeing them defer to your expertise, it shattered something in me. All these years I've been running from a heritage I should have been proud of. Your mother would be heartbroken to see what's happened between us, I said quietly. She never cared about status or credentials. She cared about character. Sarah's tears fell freely now. I know. I've betrayed both of you. The name change. That was the worst part. Mom would have hated that I was ashamed of being a Wilson. Is that why you added it back in your letter, Wilson Kensington? She nodded. I filed the paperwork last week to make it official. It's a small thing, but it matters to me. I want to honor both sides of my heritage. We sat in silence for a moment, the weight of years of misunderstanding between us. I don't expect things to go back to how they were, Sarah finally said. Too much has happened. But I'd like to try to build something new, something honest, if you're willing. I looked at my daughter. This complicated, flawed human being who had hurt me deeply, but who was now reaching across the divide with genuine remorse. The anger and humiliation I'd carried for months hadn't disappeared, but alongside them grew something else, hope. I'd like that too, I said. It won't be easy. I know. She reached across the table tentatively. After a moment's hesitation, I took her hand. Thank you for not giving up on me even when I gave you every reason to. You're my daughter, I said simply. That doesn't change no matter what. We talked for hours more openly than we had in years. Sarah shared the pressures she felt at the firm, the casual elitism she encountered daily, her struggle to find authentic connections in a world built on appearances. I told her about my volunteer work with the teenagers, the satisfaction I found in teaching practical skills, the community I was building in my retirement. As we prepared to leave, Sarah hesitated. There's one more thing. The firm is hosting a benefit next month for the Legal Aid Foundation. Would you consider coming not as a prop or a punchline, but as my father, someone I'm proud of? The invitation stirred mixed emotions. Memories of the last event, fear of being hurt again. But I also saw the sincerity in Sarah's eyes, the chance for a different kind of evening, a new chapter. I'd be honored, I said. The benefit was nothing like the awards gala. Sarah introduced me simply as my father, Joshua Wilson, with no qualifiers about my background or education. She stayed by my side much of the evening, genuinely including me in conversations. When someone asked about my work, she listened with interest to my answers, rather than trying to reframe or explain them. At one point, a senior partner commented on my contributions to the Midwest case. Your insights have been invaluable, Mr. Wilson. We legal types sometimes miss the forest for the trees. You've helped us see the bigger picture. I nodded, accepting the compliment with quiet confidence. Different perspectives have different values. That's something I've learned over the years. I caught Sarah watching me, a small smile on her face. In that moment, I felt a sense of completion. Not because I had won approval from her world, but because I had remained true to myself and found recognition on my own terms. Our relationship continued to heal slowly in the months that followed. There were awkward moments, occasional misunderstandings, old patterns that needed to be identified and changed. But there was also growing mutual respect and the gradual rebuilding of trust. The settlement for the Midwest employees was finalized. Not everything they deserved, but substantially more than the original offer. At the announcement meeting, Sarah publicly acknowledged my contribution to the case, crediting my invaluable practical knowledge and meticulous documentation for strengthening their position. Afterward, she found me in the crowd. "I've been invited to speak at a legal conference next month about this case," she told me. "Would you consider being a co-presenter, the practical and legal sides together?" The invitation represented everything our journey had been about. Recognition, respect, partnership. Not one perspective elevated above the other, but different kinds of knowledge valued equally. "I'd like that," I said. "We make a good team when we work together instead of against each other." Sarah smiled. "We do, don't we? It just took me too long to see it." As I reflect on the journey from that humiliating awards night to where we are now, I'm reminded that true dignity isn't found in status or credentials or others' approval. It comes from knowing your own worth, standing firm in your values, and responding to cruelty, not with more cruelty, but with integrity. I never sought revenge against my daughter. I sought justice for myself, for my former colleagues, and ultimately for Sarah, too. Justice that allowed her to see the value in what she had been running from, to reconnect with the authentic self she had buried beneath layers of ambition and insecurity. The pain of that night hasn't disappeared entirely. Some wounds leave permanent scars, but around those scars, new tissue has grown, stronger, more resilient, more honest than what was there before. Have you ever been hurt by someone you love? Have you struggled with finding the balance between standing up for yourself and leaving room for reconciliation? Share your experiences in the comments below. Subscribe if you'd like to hear more stories about finding dignity in difficult situations, and remember to like this video if it resonated with you. There's healing in sharing our stories and knowing we're not alone in our struggles to maintain our dignity when others try to diminish us. Thank you for listening, and remember, your worth isn't determined by others' opinions of you, but by the integrity with which you live your life.